fallen angels. Just the sound of it stirs something ancient in our hearts. What if I told you that long before modern history, long before kings and empires, a sacred rebellion took place, one that forever changed the destiny of mankind? This is not just a story whispered in the corners of forgotten scrolls. It is written in the stars, echoed in the ruins of civilizations, and tucked within the pages of the Bible, the Book of Enoch, and the sacred memories of countless cultures. Some say they were divine beings who disobeyed heaven. Others believe they were teachers, misunderstood and cast down for daring to love the daughters of men. But who were the fallen angels really? And why does their story still haunt our dreams and fascinate our deepest questions? Today, we step into the mystery. In the quiet space between myth and truth, we'll follow the footsteps of those who fell, not into darkness, but into history. Together, we'll uncover the knowledge they gave, the giants they fathered, the flood they provoked, and the ruins they may have left behind. But this isn't just a story of rebellion. It's a story of warning, of awe, and maybe of grace. So take a breath. Open your heart. Let the Spirit guide your curiosity, because what you're about to hear might not just change what you know about angels. It might change what you know about us, about yourself, about why we're here at all. Let's begin. They were called the Watchers, sent not to rule but to watch. Holy, radiant and mighty, beings of light placed among the stars and set over the earth, their task was clear. Observe, protect, but never intervene. And for a time, they did. But the heart, even in heaven, has its mysteries. The Book of Enoch tells us that as the children of men multiplied upon the earth, there came a moment, a pause in eternity, when something sacred turned. And it came to pass, Enoch writes, that the angels, the children of heaven, saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful and desirable. Pause there. This wasn't just lust, nor some fleeting curiosity. This was something deeper, a divine longing clothed in flesh. A pull toward a world they were never meant to touch. They gathered atop Mount Hermon, a high place reaching toward heaven, and there they made a pact, a forbidden covenant. Together, 200 of them swore by the name of the Most High to descend, to take wives, and to beget children. And just like that, the boundary between heaven and earth blurred. Why did they choose the daughters of men? Was it love? Desire? A longing for something only humanity possessed? The beauty of fragility, the ache of longing, the miracle of birth? Or was it rebellion from the start, an ancient pride cloaked in tenderness? Scripture doesn't give us all the answers, but it gives us enough to understand the weight of the moment. These were not casual choices, they were covenants. The angels, with eyes like fire and voices like rushing waters, gave up eternity for the embrace of mortals. They exchanged the throne of light for the arms of flesh, and in doing so, they triggered a cascade of consequences that echoed through every generation to follow. Their children were the Nephilim, giants in the land, heroes of old, men of renown. But before the giants rose, came the love that defied divine law. Think of this not just as a story, but as a pattern we've seen time and time again throughout the ages. The temptation to step beyond our boundaries, to grasp at what is beautiful, but not ours, to take. Adam and Eve saw that the fruit was pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. The Watchers saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and comely. The fall often begins with a gaze, then a longing, and finally a reach that cannot be undone. This part of the story is tender and tragic. Imagine one of the Watchers, once clothed in the glory of heaven, now walking among fields of wheat, tracing the face of a child he fathered. There must have been moments of love, moments of peace, moments where the world seemed more alive because heaven had drawn near. But behind each of those moments lay a fracture, deep, holy, irreversible. There's something painfully human about it all, isn't there? We fall for beauty. We risk everything for love. And sometimes we pay the price not just for our choices, but for the echoes of those choices in generations to come. But here's something even more mysterious. This union, as forbidden as it was, may have been allowed for a reason, a test, a revelation. Perhaps even a divine unveiling of the human heart's capacity to touch the eternal and to corrupt it at the same time. In cultures across the world, echoes of this story appear. The Greek gods fell in love with mortals and bore demigod children, Hercules, Perseus, Achilles. In Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki descended and taught mankind arts and sciences, and in doing so, fathered strange beings. In India, the Mahabharata tells of divine warriors born of the gods. Over and over again, the pattern repeats: divine beings cross the veil, and what is born is never quite human, nor fully divine. And always, always, there is consequence. There's a lesson here that stretches far beyond ancient texts. Sometimes the things we desire most, beauty, power, union, are sacred because they are meant to remain out of reach. Not because they're bad, but because they're not ours. To take them, to possess them outside the bounds of what is holy, is to corrupt both ourselves and the thing we love. We see this today in more ways than one. In technology that outpaces our morality, in relationships that begin with passion and end in pain, in knowledge we weren't ready for, but grasped at anyway. The pattern of the Watchers is not just ancient, it is modern, it is timeless, it is human. The Watchers wanted something good, connection, intimacy, love. But even good things taken outside of God's timing and design become shadows of what they were meant to be. And yet, even in this darkest moment of spiritual rebellion, there is something sacred. A reminder that heaven once reached for earth, not in judgment, not in war, but in desire. Twisted, yes. Misguided, absolutely. But real, raw, personal. We are not so different, you and I. We long for what is higher. We crave connection. And sometimes we reach too far. But unlike the Watchers, we have grace. We are not bound by eternal oaths made on mountaintops. We are invited daily into covenant, not of rebellion, but of restoration. Not a union that breaks heaven, but one that bridges it. Not with angels, but with the one who made them. So what do we learn from this forbidden union? We learn that even celestial beings, in all their might and splendor, are not immune to the ache of love. We learn that the beauty of humanity is not just skin deep, it calls to something eternal. And we learn that every act, no matter how intimate, has echoes, echoes that shape history, define bloodlines, and draw the line between rebellion and redemption. As we leave Mount Hermon behind, and the vows whispered under starlight begin to fade, a new question rises. If these unions gave birth to giants, what happened to the giants? Did they walk the earth like titans? Did they shape empires? Did they fall in the flood? Or did some survive? In the next part of our journey, we'll meet the Nephilim, not just as monsters or myths, but as beings that blurred the boundaries of what it means to be human. And perhaps, just perhaps, you'll see the world a little differently after that. Nephilim. More than just giants, they were called Nephilim. Not just giants in stature, but giants in presence, so overwhelming, so enigmatic, that even the Bible only whispers of them with caution. In those days, says Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth, and also afterward. Just 6 words. Yet from those 6 words has come one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Who were they? The name itself, Nephilim, has stirred debate for millennia. Derived from the Hebrew root naphal, meaning to fall, many interpret Nephilim as the fallen ones. Others translate it as those who cause others to fall, or giants, or even those born of the fallen. Whichever meaning you choose, one thing is clear. They were not ordinary. They were something else. Imagine a child born of an angel and a woman. Not a myth, not a metaphor, but a real, living being, a fusion of heaven's fire and earth's clay. What would such a child be like? The ancient texts don't shy away from the answer. They were massive. Their strength, legendary. Their hunger, unquenchable. According to the Book of Enoch, they devoured everything man could produce. When the earth could no longer satisfy them, they turned on mankind. It is said they consumed flesh, of beasts and of men. Their size was only matched by their corruption, and their very existence, unnatural, unintended, and unholy, was seen as an affront to the order of creation. But were they truly monsters? Here's where the story becomes more complex, more human. Genesis 6:4 doesn't call them abominations. It calls them heroes of old, men of renown. It paints them not only as threats, but as legends, as rulers, as names that echoed through the early civilizations like thunder. In the echoes of these verses, some scholars believe we find the roots of the old gods, Zeus, Thor, Gilgamesh, half-divine beings who shaped empires, built cities, and became the stuff of myth. Could it be that the gods of legend are the Nephilim of the Bible? Could it be that we remember them not as fallen beings, but as forgotten kings? Consider this. In every corner of the world, from the Norse sagas to the Babylonian tablets, from the myths of Mesoamerica to the stone carvings of India, we find tales of beings who were not quite gods, but not quite men either. They taught mankind, they ruled over nations, and always, always, they were taller, stronger, wiser than the rest. Coincidence or memory? Now pause. What if Nephilim were more than just genetic anomalies? What if they were a mirror? A reflection of what happens when power is given without restraint, when knowledge is passed down without wisdom. In some texts, they built cities. In others, they enslaved. Some were worshipped. Others feared. Perhaps they weren't born evil. Perhaps they were born of confusion, of contradiction, a soul caught between heaven and earth, without a home in either. In the apocryphal Book of Giants, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, we hear the voices of the Nephilim themselves. They dream of judgment. They cry out to heaven. Some even repent. It's not just a story of wrath. It's a story of identity. Imagine being born into a world where your existence is illegal, where your very life is the result of a celestial crime, where you tower over men, but can never enter the heavens. You are feared, not because of your choices, but because of your bloodline. Is that not the oldest struggle of humanity? To be seen beyond where we come from. The story of the Nephilim isn't just about giants, it's about legacy. What do we leave behind when we wield power without compassion? What happens when the children suffer for the sins of the fathers? And perhaps the most sobering question of all, where are they now? Genesis says they were there in those days, and also afterward. That strange phrase, and also afterward, has haunted theologians for generations. After what? After the flood? After the fall? Were there Nephilim in the promised land? The Bible says yes. In Numbers 13:33, the Israelite spies returned from Canaan trembling with fear. We saw the Nephilim there, they say. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. That was after the flood. Long after. So the Nephilim survived, or returned, or perhaps their bloodline never truly vanished. Throughout the Old Testament, we encounter echoes of the Nephilim under other names: Anakim, Rephaim, Emim, tribes of great size and power. Goliath, the Philistine warrior defeated by David, was over 9 feet tall. He was called a descendant of Rapha, a remnant perhaps of that ancient line. Even in modern times, whispers persist. Skeletal remains of extraordinary size, hidden caves, suppressed discoveries. Some believe the truth is still buried, quite literally beneath our feet. Of course, there are skeptics. Scientists explain the stories as exaggeration, metaphor, or misunderstood medical conditions like gigantism. And yet, the myths remain. The patterns persist. Maybe it doesn't matter whether the Nephilim were 9 feet tall or 6.5. Maybe the real danger wasn't in their height, but in what they represented. A collision between heaven and earth. A corruption of what was meant to be sacred. A warning. Because when the divine mixes with the mortal without God's blessing, what follows is not harmony, but chaos. And yet, even in chaos, God speaks. The Nephilim were part of a greater story, one of broken covenants and future redemption. A story where even giants must bow. A story where fallen angels fall, but mercy rises. Where the sins of the fathers are remembered, but not forever. So what do we take from their tale? Perhaps this: power without humility leads to destruction. Identity without grace leads to despair. But in God, there is a new bloodline, one that does not come from fallen angels or broken vows, but from a Savior who took on flesh, not to defy heaven, but to reconcile it with earth. The giants may be gone, or perhaps they remain, hidden in symbols, in stories, in structures too large for our understanding. But the question now is not whether they walked the earth. It's what we do with their legacy. Because up next, we explore the consequences of their presence. A world so broken, so corrupted, that even the heavens wept. A flood was coming, but not just of water, of reckoning. The ancient apocalypse, how Nephilim triggered the flood. Long before the first drop of rain fell from the sky, the earth groaned. It wasn't just the weight of sin, it was the heaviness of something unnatural, something that did not belong. The union of the Watchers and the daughters of men had brought the Nephilim into the world. Giants in size, yes, but also giants in consequence. Their very existence was a breach in the sacred order, a cosmic violation. And that violation rippled. The Book of Enoch paints a chilling picture. These Nephilim, hungry and powerful, consumed all the labor of men. When the earth could no longer sustain them, they turned to blood, devouring animals and eventually humanity itself. It was a descent from dominance to destruction, from men of renown to monsters. And all the while, the Watchers watched. They had taught humans forbidden knowledge, the secrets of war, enchantment, cosmetics, metalworking, sorcery. They had polluted creation not only by blood, but by wisdom twisted out of season. What was meant to be sacred had become seductive. What was holy had become harmful. God saw. Genesis 6:5 says it plainly. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Only evil. all the time. That line stings, doesn't it? It's not just about external violence or the giants roaming the earth. It's about the heart. The soul of man had shifted. The world was no longer just corrupted. It was corrupting. Enoch gives us a deeper view. He tells of how the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, were dispatched to observe the ruin. And they were horrified. Uriel, the angel of wisdom, warned Enoch of what was to come. A flood so vast, so final, it would cleanse the earth of this cosmic infection. God was not just angry. He was grieved. Genesis 6:6 says, "The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled." Let those words settle for a moment. God regretted. This isn't the regret of a mistake. It's the sorrow of a father watching his children fall again and again until there's no longer any space for love to bloom. It's the ache of holiness colliding with horror, the Creator looking at what once was good, and now barely recognizable. And yet, in the midst of judgment, grace. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 6:8. Noah, a man described as blameless in his generation. That word, generation, has layers. It implies not only moral uprightness, but possibly genetic integrity. In a world where the bloodline of men was being mingled with that of heaven's rebels, Noah stood pure, untouched. He was the last clean line. And through him, God would reset creation. It's here we see a truth both terrifying and tender. God does not destroy out of rage. He restores through justice. The flood wasn't simply punishment, it was preservation. It was the only way to stop the spread. Like a surgeon removing infection, God would cut deep to heal what remained. But there's more. In the Book of Jubilees, a lesser-known ancient Jewish text, we are told that the spirits of the Nephilim, once slain in the flood, did not return to heaven nor to the grave. Instead, they became disembodied spirits, the origin of demons, wandering the earth hungry, restless, seeking bodies to inhabit. That changes things, doesn't it? It means the consequences of the forbidden union didn't die in the floodwaters. They lingered, shifted form, took root in new ways, not as giants of flesh and bone, but as whispers, temptations, dark presences. And still, God had a plan. The ark was not only a vessel of survival, it was a symbol, a promise. A floating womb carrying the seeds of redemption, a new Adam, a new beginning. But this time, humanity would remember. They would carry the memory of giants, of angels who fell, of a flood that washed it all away. Or, so we thought, because remember what Genesis says. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. And also afterward. After the flood, we still find remnants. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, echoes of the ancient rebellion that survived somehow into the promised land. The Israelites feared them, fought them. Some scholars believe these post-flood giants were the result of a second incursion, another wave of rebellion. Others suggest that not all Nephilim perished in the flood, or that their corrupted DNA survived through wives brought into the ark. We may never know the exact answer, but we know this. Corruption has a way of finding cracks. And still, grace has a way of finding the faithful. Noah's story reminds us that even in the darkest chapters of history, God preserves a light, that when creation weeps, the Creator still watches. That judgment in his hands is never the end, but the beginning of something new. We often think of the flood as the climax of this story, but in truth, it was only a turning point. A divine reset, because what came after may have been quieter, but no less strange. The Nephilim may have faded from sight, but their legacy lived on, in bloodlines, in ruins, in whispers of ancient knowledge. And so we must ask, if the flood was meant to cleanse the world of their presence, why do their fingerprints still remain? Why do ancient sites around the world, Baalbek, Sacsayhuaman, Teotihuacan, bear stones so large, so precise, that even modern engineers scratch their heads in wonder? Could it be that the knowledge passed down by the watchers didn't vanish with the waters? Could it be that some secrets survived? In the next part of our journey, we step into the ruins, into the technology of the ancients, into the possibility that the forbidden knowledge still echoes through time, not in scrolls or stories, but in stone. Let's walk forward now, carefully, because where we go next might just change what we believe about the past and who really built it. Ancient technology. Did the fallen angels bring advanced knowledge? The rain had ceased, the ark had come to rest, the waters receded, and the world was given a second chance. But something lingered, not in the sky, nor in the soil, but in the stones. All around the earth, rising like ancient echoes, are monuments so massive, so precise, so impossibly advanced, they defy everything we think we know about early civilizations. And if you listen closely, if you let your spirit stay still for a moment, you'll feel it. The faint heartbeat of a knowledge that should not have survived the flood. The Book of Enoch, again, becomes our guide. In chapter 8, we meet a name that history tried to forget, Azazel, one of the leaders of the fallen angels. And he did not just father children, he fathered a revolution. He taught mankind to forge swords, to temper knives, to make shields and breastplates. He revealed the secrets of metals and the shaping of ornaments, the beautifying of faces, and the tinctures of color. He didn't bring fire. He brought technology, civilization, dominion. It was a gift and a curse. For the first time, man was no longer surviving, he was mastering. From survival to structure, from hunger to hierarchy, from innocence to empire. This knowledge was not taught in peace. It was a transmission of power, a transfer of authority from the divine to the earthly. And though mankind embraced it, creation shuddered, because we weren't ready. Let your imagination wander now, just for a moment. Imagine a people, barely settled, newly clothed, just beginning to plant seed and draw water. And suddenly, they are handed blueprints to the stars. Weapons that pierce, paints that seduce, tools that build or destroy. What do you think would happen? We don't have to guess. We have the ruins to prove it. Travel to Baalbek, Lebanon. There, embedded in the ancient platform of a forgotten temple, lies a stone weighing over 1,000 tons. Not just massive, but laser-precise, set with such accuracy that even a human hair cannot pass between its joints. And yet, there's no record of who built it. No inscription. No blueprint. Only silence. Move west to the highlands of Peru, and you'll find Sacsayhuaman, a fortress of stone so immense and interlocked that modern engineers admit, even today, we couldn't replicate it with the same precision. Stones weighing 100, even 200 tons, fit together like puzzle pieces. No mortar, no room for error. How? How did they cut and move such weight? How did they transport it across mountains and valleys? And more than that, why? Some say aliens, others, ancient ingenuity. But what if the answer lies somewhere in between? What if the Watchers, those fallen angels, did not just teach warfare and vanity, but engineering? What if they passed down the sacred geometry of heaven, the mathematics of the stars, the logic of the universe itself? In the shadow of Egypt's pyramids, we see the same fingerprint. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned with such astronomical precision that it mirrors Orion's belt. Its dimensions encode the number pi, the golden ratio, and even the speed of light. Yet it was built thousands of years ago, with no cranes, no GPS, no computers. Or so we think, because maybe the tools weren't lost, they were taken. Think of it this way. Every civilization tells the same story, not just of gods, but of gods who descended, who taught, who walked among men and raised the foundations of cities, taught the ways of heaven, and then vanished. The Mayans spoke of Kukulkan, a feathered serpent who brought knowledge from the sky. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, beings from the heavens who established kingship. The Egyptians worshipped Thoth, the divine scribe, the bringer of math, writing, and magic. Different names, same pattern, same knowledge. Same fall. And it didn't end with architecture. Artifacts have been found, real, tangible pieces of history that seem far too advanced for their time. The Antikythera mechanism, found in the sea off Greece, is a complex clockwork computer that could predict celestial movements with astonishing accuracy. It's dated to 100 BCE, but some believe its design is far older. And what of the Baghdad battery? A simple clay pot, copper cylinder, and iron rod. Yet when assembled, it can produce a weak electric current. Electroplating in the ancient world? Electricity, before Edison. Coincidence? Or continuity? Perhaps these are the aftershocks of a knowledge that was never meant to remain. Knowledge that came not from human invention, but from divine rebellion. Because here's the truth. Technology is never neutral. It is a mirror, reflecting the heart of the one who wields it. Azazel didn't just teach metallurgy, he taught warfare. He didn't just reveal colors, he taught seduction. Every gift he gave was twisted at its root, because it bypassed something sacred, the process. What we earn, we respect. What we are handed, we exploit. We see it even today. We hold devices in our hands with more computing power than what sent man to the moon. We can create or destroy with the swipe of a finger. But has our soul evolved with our tools? Has our morality kept pace with our machines? The fallen angels gave knowledge, but not wisdom. And that's the lesson. Knowledge alone cannot save us. It cannot purify the heart. Without the spirit, it becomes a weapon. Without love, it becomes control. Without truth, it becomes a lie dressed in gold and data. So where does that leave us? Standing in the ruins once more, looking at stones that shouldn't exist, machines that shouldn't work, and knowledge that feels too old to be new. The question is not whether the fallen angels brought technology. The question is, what have we done with it? And perhaps an even deeper one, who gave it to us now? Because the hunger hasn't gone away. The longing for more. The desire to reach beyond our bounds. The temptation to become like gods, without God. And just like in the days of Noah, just like in the days of the Watchers, we are choosing what to do with what we've been given. In the next chapter of our journey, we'll trace the stories across the world, mythologies that mirror one another from continent to continent. Stories of gods who fell, taught, built, and vanished. Stories so similar, they cannot be coincidence. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find that the fallen angels left behind more than ruins. They left behind a legacy, one that still speaks, even now. Archaeological anomalies, giant tools or giant stories, The stones don't lie. They don't speak either. But sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. Scattered across the earth, tucked away in dusty museums and buried deep in forgotten valleys, are relics that seem to whisper a different version of history. One that doesn't fit neatly into textbooks. One that challenges everything we thought we knew about who built what and how. Let's start with something simple. A sword. Not just any sword, but a nodachi, found in Japan's Ibaraki prefecture. This weapon, on display at the Kibitsu shrine, measures over 12 feet in length and weighs more than 30 pounds. It's not ceremonial. It's balanced, sharpened, forged to be used, but by whom? The average samurai was not 12 feet tall. No one, not even the largest warriors in recorded Japanese history, could have wielded that sword with any efficiency. And yet, it was made. It exists. It's real. Move west and you'll find the Flensburg sword in Europe, over 7 feet long. Balanced for battle. Its size alone rules out any practical human use, unless, of course, the user wasn't exactly human-sized. In Denmark, massive Bronze Age axes have been unearthed. Not just one, but entire collections of oversized tools and weapons. In Morocco, archaeologists discovered a cache of tools so large, some believed they were made for ritual giants. Others dismissed them as symbolic. Decorative, but again, forged, balanced, and built to last. And then there's the footprint. Near the town of Mpuluzi in South Africa, etched into granite itself, lies what many claim to be a fossilized human-like footprint, measuring nearly 4 feet long. Perfectly shaped. Toes, arch, heel. The surrounding rock is over 200 million years old. Most geologists call it a natural formation, but it doesn't look natural. It looks intentional. And that's what makes this part of the story so fascinating. These aren't just artifacts. They're questions carved in stone. They challenge us to look again, not just at the evidence, but at the assumptions we bring to it. Mainstream archaeology tends to shrug. Oversized tools, ritualistic, symbolic. That's the default explanation. It's the safe one, the tidy one. But symbols don't need balance. Ritual tools don't require precise metallurgy, and decorative weapons don't need to be sharpened. Some researchers have dared to ask, what if these artifacts were functional? What if they were used, just not by us? This brings us to the structures. We talked earlier about the grandeur of Baalbek and Sacsayhuaman, but they're not the only sites that raise eyebrows. In Greece, at the Heraklion Archaeological Museum, there are giant double axes, weapons so massive they would require superhuman strength to wield. Some date back to Minoan times. No one really knows who made them, or why. In Egypt, in addition to the pyramids, there are obelisks left half-carved in solid bedrock, some of which, if completed, would have stood as the largest stone structures ever erected. But they were abandoned, left unfinished, as if whatever built them was interrupted or vanished. Let's be honest, none of this proves giants walked the earth, but it doesn't disprove it either, and maybe that's the point. Maybe the value of these anomalies isn't in what they confirm, but in what they challenge. Because when we hold a 7-foot sword in our hands, or stand before a stone slab the size of a locomotive, we're forced to confront a possibility, that we're not the pinnacle of all that has come before. That perhaps long ago there were beings, giant or otherwise, who knew something we've forgotten. Knowledge passed down, not through books, but through stone. And that brings us to one of the biggest questions of all. Why would the story of giants, of beings larger, stronger, more powerful than man, exist in so many cultures, across so many eras from people who never met. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, descending from the heavens and teaching mankind the arts of civilization. The Greeks had their Titans, enormous beings cast down by the gods for challenging divine authority. The Norse believed in the Jötnar, a race of giants who lived at the edges of the world, often in conflict with the gods. The Hindus told of Danavas and Daityas, powerful beings descended from divine bloodlines. The Hebrew Bible speaks of the Nephilim, and the Mayans. They had stories of tall white gods who brought calendars, math, and astronomy before mysteriously disappearing. Coincidence or memory? It's not just the similarity of the stories, it's the persistence of the pattern. Different continents, different languages, same archetypes. Over and over again. It's almost as if humanity has been trying, generation after generation, to remember something we've collectively forgotten. Something we may not have written down in textbooks, but carved into stone so we wouldn't lose it entirely. And here's where things take a turn. Because the more we investigate these anomalies, the more we realize. They don't stand alone. They're part of a tapestry. A pattern, one that includes ancient star maps, lost cities beneath the oceans, monoliths that track solar alignments with uncanny precision. Each piece strange on its own. But together, they start to look like fingerprints. Fingerprints of a time when knowledge was given rather than earned. When beings not quite human passed down secrets not quite safe. We like to think of progress as linear, that we've always been moving upward, smarter, stronger, more advanced. But what if that's not true? What if we're climbing back towards something we once had? What if they, whoever they were, left behind tools, monuments, and myths, not to impress us, but to warn us? Because here's the truth. Power without understanding leads to destruction. And we've been here before. A time of giants. A time of chaos. A time of floods. And just maybe, a time when heaven and earth weren't so far apart. In the next chapter of this journey, we'll zoom out even further. We'll compare mythologies from around the world, looking for patterns not just in tools and temples, but in the stories themselves. What if the gods, the giants, the shining ones, weren't metaphors? What if they were memories? And what if we're closer to them than we think? Global myth parallels, coincidence or shared memory. Some stories feel strangely familiar, like echoes from a dream you've never had, but somehow remember. You see them repeated across continents, whispered in different tongues, clothed in the colors of countless cultures. Different gods, different names, but the same bones, beings who descended from the sky, who taught, who ruled, who fell. You could call it coincidence. But how many coincidences make a pattern? Let's start in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. Thousands of years ago, scribes etched onto clay tablets the tales of the Anunnaki, sky beings who came down to Earth. They weren't just observers, they were architects of society. They taught writing, math, agriculture. They established kingship. And they didn't leave quietly. They were overthrown, cast down, or simply disappeared. Sound familiar? Shift your gaze to Greece, and the picture sharpens. The Titans, powerful primordial beings, ruled before the Olympian gods. They were massive, ancient, and some say too proud. Their downfall was inevitable. But one Titan stands apart. Prometheus. He defied Zeus, stole fire from the heavens, and gave it to mankind. Not so different from Azazel, is he? Prometheus gave technology. Azazel gave knowledge. Both crossed a line, and both paid the price. Now turn north, to the frostbitten realms of Norse mythology. There, the world was shaped not by gods alone, but in conflict with giants, the Jotnar. The gods didn't create the cosmos from scratch. They fought for it. The Jotnar weren't mindless monsters. They were beings of power and wisdom. Some even married into the divine families. And just like the Nephilim, they straddled the boundary between chaos and order, feared but never forgotten. Head across the ocean, deep into Mesoamerica. The Maya tell of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who came from the sky. He brought astronomy, timekeeping, and architecture. The Aztecs knew him as Quetzalcoatl, the morning star, the great teacher, the divine visitor who left, but promised to return. And in Peru, the Inca spoke of Viracocha, a bearded god who created mankind, walked among them, and then disappeared across the sea. Strange, isn't it? A bearded deity, unknown to the native gene pool, sailing away, promising one day he would return. The echo of a god, fading into legend. In India, ancient Vedic texts speak of Danavas, Daityas, and Asuras, mighty beings who descended from the heavens. Some fought against the gods, others ruled kingdoms. They possessed flying machines known as Vimanas and wielded weapons that sounded eerily modern, flaming discs, fire-tipped arrows, and thunderbolts. Even in the vast deserts of Australia, Aboriginal myths speak of sky beings who came down and taught the first people how to survive, how to hunt, how to live in harmony with the land. It's everywhere. Not just stories of gods, but stories of visitors, stories of knowledge given, stories of something that came before. So the question becomes, how? How did people, oceans apart, cultures separated by time and language, end up telling the same story? One theory says it's the human imagination. We all fear the unknown, so we invent similar legends to explain it. Another says it's ancient archetypes, psychological patterns burned into the collective unconscious, as Carl Jung believed. But what if it's something else? What if it's memory? A shared memory, not of fiction, but of contact. What if, long ago, there was a global event or series of events that scattered these stories like seeds? What if these weren't myths, but memories, passed down through generations like whispers in the dark? Memories of the Watchers. Memories of a time when knowledge came from the sky, when cities rose too quickly, when giants walked the earth, when chaos followed. And then, silence, a flood, a fall, a forgetting, but not completely. The stories remained, hidden in stone, in firelight songs, in ink and ash. And they tell us more than we realize. Because when you place them side by side, not just one or two, but dozens, you begin to see a silhouette forming, a shadow behind the veil of history. It isn't clear, it isn't comfortable, but it's there. A race of powerful beings, a transgression, a flood of judgment, and scattered survivors. So what do we do with this? Do we write it off as myth? Do we file it away in the drawer marked coincidence? Or do we dig deeper? Because here's the thing. Myth is rarely just myth. It's memory, worn soft by time. It's history, seen through stained glass. And maybe, just maybe, it's warning. A warning about pride. About power. About forgetting where the line between heaven and earth really lies. These global parallels don't just reveal our past. They challenge our present. They ask us to confront a history bigger than we're taught, and older than we're comfortable admitting. But before we close the book on giants and gods and the fallen stars, there's one last journey we must take. Because what if the fingerprints of the fallen angels didn't just leave stories? What if they left bloodlines? They say history is written by the victors, but what if the most important parts of our history were never written down at all? What if they were buried, whispered, scattered across the ruins of dead empires and the dreams of ancient peoples? What if the stories we call myth were not fantasies but fragments, echoes of something too large to comprehend, too dangerous to remember clearly, yet too important to forget? You've walked with me now through forbidden unions and celestial rebellions, through the rise of the Nephilim and the drowning silence of the flood. We've stood in the shadows of colossal stones, stared into the eyes of oversized swords, listened to the forgotten languages of gods and giants. We've traced the same stories across deserts, oceans, mountains, told in tongues thousands of years apart, yet somehow speaking the same truth. Something happened. Something big. And it didn't just happen once. It happened everywhere. There's a strange kind of thrill in realizing that the world you thought you knew may only be a sliver of the truth, that the ancient past may hold more knowledge, more danger even, than our future ever could. That maybe, just maybe, we are the descendants of survivors, not of a flood alone, but of a story too sacred to speak aloud. The story of those who fell, and those who learned from them. And now you have to ask yourself, why do these tales persist? Why are they still here, long after the bones have turned to dust and the temples have crumbled into sand? Perhaps because they were never just stories. Perhaps they were warnings. Warnings about knowledge that came too soon, about the cost of defying the divine, about the thin, shimmering veil between heaven and earth, and how easily it tears when we reach beyond what we're ready to carry. Maybe that's why the Watchers were forbidden to intervene. Maybe that's why the Nephilim weren't allowed to stay. Maybe that's why the flood came, not to erase, but to reset. Not to punish, but to protect. And maybe that's why you're here right now, listening, wondering, feeling something stir that you can't quite explain. Because deep down, some part of you knows that the world is older, stranger, and far more connected than we've been led to believe. You know that civilizations don't just rise and fall by accident, that myths don't appear out of nowhere, that knowledge, true knowledge, comes with weight, and that somewhere, lost in time, a choice was made, a line was crossed, and we've been living in the consequences ever since. This isn't the end of the story. It never was. If anything, this is just the beginning. The deeper we look, the more the puzzle pieces shift. The more the familiar becomes foreign. The more we realize that the fallen angels may not have vanished. That their legacy might be far from over. Not in myth, not in stone, but in blood, in names, in lineages that still walk the earth, hidden, silent, waiting. And here's where it gets even stranger. The more you know, the more you're drawn in. Not because it's entertainment, but because it feels like something you've always known, something just out of reach, something ancient inside of you waking up. That's why this channel exists, not to give easy answers, but to ask the harder questions, not to tell you what to believe, but to help you see what's been hidden in plain sight. Together, we are digging beneath the surface of scripture, myth, and history. We are connecting the dots that others have ignored, or perhaps were too afraid to connect. And there's still so much more ahead. We'll uncover the possibility of Nephilim bloodlines continuing into modern dynasties. We'll explore the mysterious disappearances of entire civilizations. We'll decode symbols carved in forgotten languages. We'll ask if the Watchers ever truly left, or if they simply changed names and disappeared into the shadows of power. But I can't do it alone. If this journey stirred something in you, if it made you pause, question, feel that electric pull towards something deeper, then I invite you to be part of this community. Subscribe, like, share this video with someone who needs to remember that the world is more than bills, alarms, and concrete. Someone who still believes in wonder, who still feels that thrill when the sky darkens and the old stories rise like thunder. Because the past isn't just behind us. It's under our feet, it's in our blood, it's watching us. So, are you ready to keep going? Because the story continues, and the deeper we go, the stranger and more real it gets. See you in the next chapter.